Okay, this is the last class for logic and argument in writing. Today I'm going to demonstrate how to revise your draft. So in this class, students were asked to write a personal statement. This is a document you introduce yourself to your future employers. So as a prospective teacher, you were supposed to describe your teaching principles. And in this case, your readers would be school principals and English teachers who have a lot of experiences in teaching and administrations. So you have to argue why you would be an excellent teacher. Now, before working on the draft, let me go over some important features in writing process. We have discussed this issue in previous videos. So for details, you need to watch those videos. Now, writing generally consists of three phases. First phase is creating ideas. You generate and collect ideas through brainstorming and free writing. Once you have created ideas, you try to shape through revising by connecting and revising the ideas. Eventually, that leads you to build a trajectory, storyline that are coherent. And then the last stage, you work on your languages, correcting your grammars and replacing inadequate vocabularies and so on. So you cannot write a good piece of writing in one sitting. You have to go through in a revision process. So one useful way to do this is schedule your writing into a two process. This one we talked about last class. So this is idea by Peter Elbow. You divide your writing phase into a first draft stage and then revised stages. So suppose if you have 10 days, rather than putting off your writing task into the last 2 days, you want to work on your first draft in the first day, and then the revising task should be done in the last day. So to make this possible, this should happen. The first draft writing should be easy. Then you would be able to spend more time on rewriting. So I offer some examples and demonstrations in last video clip. Now, before we work on the revisions, I'd like you to think about these three issues in building your statement. First, I'd like you to use some keywords and technical words on specific things. So if you use a keywords, you certainly can generalize a specific and concrete phenomena into a larger categories. For example, some students write that they want their student to feel comfortable. Then that's an issue of learning environment, creating a positive learning environment. So once you use the keywords, you could discuss other issues that is related to learning environment. Also, if you want to talk about boring lecturing, the larger category that accommodate boring lecturing would be probably a traditional method in which knowledge transmissions model was prominent. So rather than two-way communications, the knowledge transmission model only focusing on one-way information transfer from the teachers and students and so on. So you want to able to go back and forth between larger abstract words to concrete and specific cases. Second issue would be when you write a teaching statement, you want to provide a sort of personalized principles. So you want to create an individual characteristics that make you as a teacher as a unique teacher. So you're not simply describing a good method or good principles, but you want to describe what you bring to the table. What would be unique things you would do as a teacher. So that's the second issue. The third issue is the organizations. of your writing. So when you present your principles, you want to begin with a key argument first. This becomes your thesis statement, and also it becomes a foreshadowing argument. In Korean, 두 갈식으로 쓰는 겁니다. Foreshadowing. So I want to demonstrate how to do this in a minute. Second, once you produce a key argument, then you provide some details and supporting argument, and then you provide some summative remark on that issue. I'm going to discuss and demonstrate the two sample first draft and to revise them into a better writing. So let's take a look at this. This is a draft. And let me read. My English teacher in my high school was the reasons why I wanted to be a teacher. Students are mostly focusing on getting a good grade in college entrance examination. I want to create a learning environment in which students feel comfortable. Good teachers pay attention to students and support them with feedback. Then second paragraph, students can be emotionally defensive if they are uneasy and afraid of learning. This is because when students face problems that leads to emotional distress, their concentration decreases drastically. The third paragraph, for older students, peer pressure acts as a big influence to participate less in class since they could develop a negative reputation among peers. An emotional bond between the student and teacher is crucial for the learning environment. Now, here we see that the writer talks about student emotion and then the teacher's roles in dealing with student emotion. And then she talks about peer relations. So several ideas are mixed. So we need to sort out these ideas in a coherent manner. So let's begin working on this issue. Okay, let me illustrate this first. Now, as I said before, we want to begin with a key statement. So I would say something like the second principles I follow is, okay? So you're not going to write here because you don't know what you're going to write yet. So when we are done with working on B, C, D, then we come back to create a thesis statement. So, and also, I noted that this passage talks about students' emotions. So let's talk about this. Students can be emotionally defensive. So we want to put this issue first here, and then see if they are logically connected by revising each sentences. So let's say students can be emotionally defensive. Well, we don't want to say defensive. Defensive is when you are fight. So emotionally, probably vulnerable. Why are they vulnerable? Because there are a lot of pressure, various pressure. For example, such as maintaining a good grade and keeping good peer relations. So peer relation was discussed in there later on. Okay, then we have to develop this issue further. When they are pressured heavily, they lose their concentration. So here they talk about concentration. So I simply connect these two ideas here. Then we want to go back to the teacher's role. She talks about good teachers. So good teachers Here, good teachers pay attention to students and support with them. So we want to put this issue here and here. But we need to change a little bit to make connections to the prior sentences. So good teachers, we have to say something about emotional things because you already talked about emotional things. So good teachers are well aware of student emotional needs by listening to them and offering advice and feedback. Okay, feedback. So how does it look? So we talked about the students' emotional problems, and then we talked about what good teachers do. Okay. Now, this writer talks about her English teachers, and it's probably because she gave a good example. So we need to connect B to C here. And she says, my English teacher in my school was the reasons why I wanted to be a good teacher. I wanted to be a teacher. We want to talk about a little bit specific by connecting to the prior sentence where student emotion was the issue. And at the same time, you want to connect into a keywords. So my English teacher in high school was maybe such a teacher who created an environment where students feel comfortable. So when students feel comfortable, what can they do? Well, they to explore new method and to communicate actively, or something like that. So they don't enough and communicate. They participate more actively. And then she said something about emotional bonds. So the emotional bonds between the teacher, we want to put this here. So emotional bond, since we keep talking about emotional bonds, so emotional bonds between the student and the teacher. And teacher is crucial. This is good. Crucial for the learning environment. Crucial in moody students to overcome difficulties and perform better. Okay. Okay, how does that sound? So we talked about, we connect her high school teachers into what she said in the early paragraphs. Now, since you talk about high school teacher, you have to come back to you. So what you would do as a teacher. So attending to students' emotional needs have not been considered critical for classroom teaching. In my opinion, however, this is one key factor for successful teaching. I will strive to create such an environment for my students, something like that. Okay, so we talked about students' emotional problems, and then we talked about high school teachers. We connected to it, and then we talked about how you would follow suit to create that kind of environment. Okay, so we have sort of nicely coherent ideas. So we have not correct any grammatical mistakes, but that's going to be the last stage. Now, the last things I want you to do is go back to the first sentence here. to create a thesis statement that introduces the key ideas. So here, something like the second principles I follow is to create a positive learning environment in which students are highly motivated and actively engaged in the learning activities. Okay, so now that you have you're aware of what you said here, you can create a thesis statement that is more specific and detailed. And this kind of thesis statement is really helpful for readers to recognize what is to come, what they're going to read in the rest of the sentence. So this is one way to create that kind of environment. Okay, let's talk about one more issue. This one is another principle written by a different student. I think it talks about the writing, and so let's read this together. Traditionally, we have learned that in order to write a good writing, we need to have a good understanding of the reading. This helps us to get good thoughts. Then we would be able to put down this great thought onto our writing. However, various scholars such as Elbow and Fletcher argue that writing involves a lot of thinking and thus is helpful in generating ideas. In fact, Elbow proposed a way to make writing process easier to make creative ideas better. He divided writing process into 2 stages, starting with creative writing, the gather brainstorming ideas, then critical writing, in which one revises the writing process. This idea is realized into process writing. This approach seems to work better because it focuses on students to learn during the class. Okay, so talk about writing and then reading and then thinking. So 3 ideas are mixed. We need to sort these things out. Second, this in fact lowers students' anxiety because they take a lot of pressure from the students. I would use this process approach because it helps me. Researchers in SLA argues that learning should be more integrative while attending to the students' needs in writing. So it talks about students getting off some pressures, and then process writing. And then writing and reading is related because by writing you can recognize the problems you have in your reading, not understanding key points, what vocabulary items you do not know, misunderstanding of their content. So this one talks about the advantages of teaching writing and reading simultaneously. So, as I noted before, several ideas are mixed together. This is a typical first draft writing. So this is not wrong. You put all these ideas in your first draft, and then when you are revising, you kind of sort things out because it's easier in that way because you already have a lot of ideas and you're simply reordering and then revising. So let's work on this. As I did in the prior one, we also want to say, some key words. So the probably third principle I want to follow is, and we'll come back to this. And then here, traditionally, we have thought in the writing, in the thinking, writing, thinking, writing. Let's begin with writing, writing, relations between writing and thinking. So traditionally, we have learned that in order to write a good writing, we need to have a good understanding. Let's focus on writing, the thinking. So learn that good writing present good thinking. But process writing has a different idea. So, however, various scholars, so let's go back, various scholars such as Elbow Fletcher argue that writing involves a lot of things. We want to emphasize a little bit. Writing is not simply a matter of putting down completed thought. Rather, writing itself generates good thinking. So I'm trying to clarify what the text says. So writing is not, when you write, that generates writing, thinking. But in the past, if you have already have a good thinking, you just automatically write it out. But Fletcher's and Elbow, these people have a different idea. So I try to clarify this. So this idea is realized here, process writing here. So we want to connect here to process writing. Where did it go? Oh, process writing. Then you have to explain a little bit further that attends to the process in which students generate thinking, because we've been talking about thinking, through writing. So I think you have explained fully about traditional thinking and then alternative thinking. Then you need to talk about what you think about this. So you say, I fully endorse this idea of process writing. Okay, so we took care of writing and thinking. Now we need to move on to writing and reading. So in order to take writing process, I want to use reading-writing connection. And then remember, there is a passage that talks about the advantage. So we want to put these things here. Then it's going to be connected well. Oops. So writing and reading is related because by writing you can negotiate, we can recognize, and then so on. So you can. There's some room to change, but well, we'll do it later. Okay. Then you kind of have to slowly come back to what you would do. So this idea of integrative teaching, since you are connecting reading and writing, you are not just teaching reading or writing separately. So it's called the connected integrative writing. And then the SLA researchers said something about this. Remember in here, so we are trying to connect it there. So integrative teaching was confirmed in second language research. And then you put that here, idea in writing. Right, okay. Then you have to say something about what you would do. So I will use writing as a learning tool to help students understand and apply the content presented in reading while developing their own ideas. Remember, we are talking about writing. In writing, we just talked about how it can generate ideas. So I can refer to you can refer to that ideas here. Okay. So we accommodate these two ideas between first reading and writing and thinking, and then reading and writing. So we took care of these two ideas, and then we have to introduce that idea using a thesis statement. So let's go back. The third principle I want to follow is integrative approach, in which more than one language skill is learned. This approach also uses writing as a thinking tool. Right? This will be enough. Then this one, the second sentence explains the first paragraph, and then this one explains the third one. So you can rework on this issue to make that connection. So as a whole, this statement has a thesis statement that talks about the rest of the sentence. 두 가지식으로 썼죠. So to foreshadow what is to come in the writing. And then later on, I kind of thought out some important ideas in a good order to make logical connections among sentences. And then one sentence argument gets expanded into 2 or 3 sentences to explain and specify what was presented in these ideas. So these 2 writing will present a revision process. What you need to do in revision process, when you see the ideas and then identify key features and then you order them appropriately and then you create a key sentences and then connect those ideas at a micro level by working on the languages and the grammatical features and so on. So I think this would be sufficiently demonstrated in these 2 cases. Okay, let's go back to let's summarize these issues. Okay, as I have shown, it's important to order argument in such a way that readers can make sense. So first draft is where you put ideas, but in revision process, by doing rewriting, moving, ordering, deleting, and reorganizing, you order your ideas so that readers can make sense out of it. And that's an important process to make your writing much more effective and convincing. Now, when you're done with these revisions, then you can do the editing, where you work on grammatical problems, correcting punctuations, and removing all linguistic errors. So rather than putting new ideas at the last minute, working on revisions, revising your draft will be much more helpful to make your writing more convincing and coherent. Okay, so far we have discussed on argumentative writing. So I demonstrated first draft and how to write a first draft and how to revise the first draft. So I hope this helps you spend more time so that you on your revising, so that you can make your writing much more convincing. And that's all I prepare for the last video clip. Thank you for watching all this video clip.